I'm Tom Shanahan. Welcome to the End Game, where we discuss race and sports and how sports can help us learn a lot about America and how we get along together as a nation. My partner, Herman Bowles, is busy doing his other job, flying a lot around the country. So I'm going solo this week, but wanted to get this episode taken care of because I think it's a real important show. Jim Probostall has a very interesting history at Michigan State. A lot of it thrust upon him, unfortunately, because of CTE. His brother Dick suffered concussions in high school and college, and Jim wrote a book about it called Unintended Impact, which we'll get to later in the video. But Jim has pretty much become an expert on CTE, right, Jim?
Well, unfortunately, I've had a more exposure than anyone should deserve. So I guess that's made me more aware of it than most people, yes.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating book. And like I said, we'll talk about that more later. The one thing I want to start out with, I'm always trying to get the true story out there about Michigan State leading college football integration. And in the 1960s, most schools, the South was of course segregated, but most schools, in fact, primarily almost all of them, followed unwritten quotas limiting Black athletes to a half dozen or so. And Duffy Daugherty was the first coach to kind of just smash those limitations. And eventually, as the decade moved along, other schools began to follow the example, partly because the Spartans had so much success in the mid-60s. When Michigan State had 23 Black players in the Rose Bowl and then 20 Black players in the game of the century with 11 Black starters. Other schools, USC won their 1962 national title with only 5 Black players. Notre Dame was a 66 national champ with only 1, Alan Page, a great one, and your old high school teammate. And then as late as 1967, USC only had 7 Black players on its national championship team. But Jim, when you guys all got together in the 1960s, it was just business as usual. It wasn't something that definitely certainly wasn't a self-promoter. He wasn't on self-crusading. It was just something he did because it was the right thing to do.
Well, you look back at things and you try to figure out why things happened the way they did. And Duffy was clearly a unique man. He was a great recruiter. And, if you turned him loose into your house, the parents of any athlete were going to get very excited about sending you to Michigan State. So I think that led to a unique opportunity for Duffy, really. He was an opportunist. He was a good coach, and he was looking to build a program at Michigan State. And I think he was one of the early ones to recognize that the great Black athletes from the South were not getting the exposure that they needed in the large universities and the good football programs in the South. So he took it upon himself to create an opportunity for many of those Black athletes to come to Michigan State. And to his credit, they did, which capitalized on his recruiting skills as well, too. So I think he was one of the early adopters in this area. And I don't know whether it was promoted based on race or anything of that sort. I really don't think so, because we had a number of Black athletes already at Michigan State. That was not new. But Black athletes from the South was new. That's what was new.
Yeah. I should add in here, Bob, why don't you briefly talk about how Duffy recruited your brother, Dick, first? You got there in 62. Dick would have got there in 60. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah, that's right. Just
talk about Duffy recruiting the two of you. Was it a slam dunk you were going to follow your brother, or talk about
No, not at all, Tom. The Duffy was the recruiting rules changed in 1962. Up until that point in time, the recruiting coaches were not permitted to recruit inside the home of the athlete. They always had to recruit in a public location, typically a restaurant of some sort of that sort. So when my brother was recruited, Duffy came and did a presentation at our high school banquet, because there were a number of athletes on our high school team that he was interested in. And so that was different at that time. And then Dick, of course, made the decision to go to Michigan State. But when I was recruited, that's the year that it changed where the coaches could come into the house of the athlete. And turning Duffy into somebody's home, I mean, he had such a personality and he was such an easy man to get along with and to like. That he was just a great salesman for Michigan State and for Michigan State football. And he knew how to say the right things. And for my parents, that was getting a solid education and having the opportunity to playing football at a top-notch level. So it was different. And
let me remind our viewers here that Dick was a quarterback, Jim was a tight end. Jim was a starting tight end on the '65 Rose Bowl team. And there's just a fascinating connection between two 1960s controversies that would continue to grow in football. One being the lack of black quarterbacks, and Jimmy Ray was a breakthrough there for Michigan State. There were only two starting black quarterbacks in the country in 1966 when he led the Spartans to the game of the century. And the other one that nobody was talking about yet was concussions. And your brother suffered a bad one. Spring football '64, if I got this correct, and the doctors told Duffy he can't play football anymore. But Duffy invited Dick to stick with the team as a freshman coach. And then that's where Dick and Jimmy crossed paths. And Jimmy has always said that learning Duffy's option offense was hard for him because the footwork was opposite of the open passing game he played in high school. And he's credited your brother Dick with being instrumental to adjusting to this option offense and being able to play Big Ten football. Talk about that transition for your brother. Was it something he was happy to do, or did Duffy have to talk him into it, or how'd that all develop?
Well, I mean, I wasn't so much a part of that discussion. All I knew is that my brother was a natural leader. He did not shirk responsibilities or anything of that sort. And given the opportunity to help a young athlete like Jimmy Ray make the transition from his natural skill as a high school athlete to a talented quarterback at a top level program like Michigan State, that's a bit of a transition. It's a transition in most of the positions, but particularly true in the quarterback position. The one thing that I think we have to look at is that in football, 11 people have to do everything right at the same time. And that's unique in a sport. So you have to really be prepared to focus on your responsibilities as well as coordinate your responsibilities with the player next to you. The quarterback had even a bigger responsibility because the quarterback had to ensure the proper execution of the play for all 11 players. So a very unique responsibility. So coming from high school football, high school quarterbacks knew that, but Jimmy was a natural athlete and he was struggling with the footwork necessary. You had great running backs at Michigan State. Obviously, you had Bob Apisa, you had Clinton Jones, and the quarterback sets up the success of the play with their footwork and their ability to execute some rather complicated maneuvers in the backfield. And that's what my brother was happy to work with Jimmy. He enjoyed it. Dick was a natural teacher anyway. He was a natural leader and he enjoyed it. And I think he and Jimmy, I know Jimmy has spoken very positively of that relationship in the past.
Right.
And as far as him being black, I don't think that was even a thought, quite frankly.
Yeah. And that's what was special about the Michigan State locker room. So it was years and years later that Dick started to slip into the dementia from the CTE, and even longer before your family understood what was happening, right? If you could kind of give us a thumbnail about what happened to your brother and that leading to you to writing the book, Unintended Impact, that for any family that's dealing with CTE, I recommend they read this book because you cover it beginning to end.
But thanks, Tom. I tried to cover from, I think it would fall into the category of a creative nonfiction story. it's as much a story about brother relationship, brotherly love, and things of that sort. Because I mean, Dick was my North Star on a lot of things. He was far more centered than I was at that point in time, and he was very helpful for me in growing up as well too. But after college and after not just one concussion, he had many, many, many concussions in high school and in college, as well as a lot of us did. But for some reason, he was afflicted by the CTE, and the symptoms, while he had vicious migraines and problems of that nature, the symptoms of the dementia started to kick in right around 39 is when he started seeing. And you have to understand what happens for those people who don't understand CTE. What happens is that the brain slowly starts to shrink, and it's subtle. And pretty soon you see behavior disorders. You see anger management issues. You see inability to socialize correctly in the environment. So as your brain starts to shrink, that performance continues to get worse. So in Dick's case, what happened, by the time that he died, his brain was literally only 75% of the normal size. So that's not a functioning brain, and it leads to a form of death. He had a combination of Alzheimer's with that, but it led to his death.
Yeah. Now you had his brain donated to, is it Boston University that does all
Yeah,
this?
that's right. Exactly. You know, Boston University, that's where all the brain studies are done. Mine will go there. A lot of athletes, a lot of Michigan State athletes have their brain. I've been kind of a promoter and supporter. I mean, once we're gone, what are we going to do with it anyway? You know, we might as well allow people to benefit from the experience of our athletics and the effect on our brain in positive research.
And of course, you've stayed involved studying it as much as you can. Where are we? How long ago did your brother die?
I'm sorry?
How long ago did your brother pass away?
Oh boy, it's probably been 9 years.
Yeah, I was thinking it was about a decade.
Yeah.
How much better do we understand things in the past decade? Because you've been following it so closely.
Well, you know, you probably need a professional to answer that. I participated in a study that was done as well as a number of other Michigan State athletes did, in a study that was sponsored by by Boston University, major study on CTE in terms of what caused it, what are the effects of it, how does it lead to death, and how does it contribute to other problems in life. And I don't know that they've come to a final conclusion yet. They're just finishing up with the study. It was took place over about 5 years. So it was a longitudinal study of significance. And they're just putting together the final report now. And I don't know, I'm not aware of an absolute definitive answer of CTE at this point in time. I'm anxious to see the final results.
Yeah, it's probably still out there in the future. Well, people can learn a lot from reading your book, Unintended Impact, and we'll flash on the screen here your book with information. Tell people who have a family member that maybe they're suspicious of CTE or they don't understand CTE at all, but they see the anger problems. Tell them how to proceed. What do you recommend? What would you tell a family that is confused by their father or brother or uncle's behavior?
Well, I think you almost have to go back a little earlier than that, because I've done a number of presentations about the book, Tom. And a lot of parents are sometimes reluctant to have their son play football because of the notoriety and the problems around CTE. And I guess you can understand this concern. But on the other hand, some of us aren't made to play the piano all the time. Okay? And it's that there's certain young men that just, they like the physical contact of the sport, even though it's demanding, it's difficult. They like that, and they like the teamwork that's built around the sport. So I wouldn't necessarily keep my kids out of football, but I would not start them in football in 5th grade or 6th grade.
Right. Yeah.
I would wait until the body and the brain matures more. And I think that's kind of common advice at this point in time.
Yeah.
In terms of actually getting CTE, there's lots of opportunities. I would go to your primary care doctor or neurologist. If you start to see unusual behaviors, aggressive behaviors, socially unacceptable behaviors, and they can vary quite a bit in terms of what you see. I would just get the person in front of a trained professional. It's not a mystery as much as it was back when it was diagnosed. And there's lots of options out there. Probably a good neurologist is a place to start.
Right. Okay. Well, Jim, it was a pleasure having you on. And I think we got another big season coming up for the Spartans. And we'll talk to you again soon.